Hey, Red. We're not gonna get away with this, are we?
10 years ago today, developer Supergiant Games released Transistor. While many today know Supergiant for their work on Hades, and now Hades 2, Transistor was my introduction to their works, and it holds a special place in my heart. As even 10 years on from its original release, I still feel the impact it had on me, and I love it just as much now as I did when I initially played it. So today, I wanted to offer a retrospective of sorts on the game, its history and story leading up to its release in 2014, my personal experience with the game, a brief overview of how the game plays, and where it is now all these years later. With that said, put on your most dapper fit, make your way to your seats, and enjoy the show. This is 10 Years of Transistor. It's 2014. The next generation of PlayStation and Xbox had just kicked off the prior holiday season with the release of the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. Nintendo was looking to deliver the biggest and best year for their then current system, the Wii U, with releases like Mario Kart 8 and Super Smash Bros. And Supergiant Games was poised to release their next game in the spring, Transistor. But let's turn back the clock for a moment before we continue on. Back to 2011. In July of that year, Supergiant Games hit the gaming scene with the release of their first ever title, Bastion, which went on to earn more than 100 industry accolades, score an 86 on Metacritic, and be regarded as overwhelmingly positive on Steam with almost 27,000 reviews. Needless to say, Bastion was a success, and while the team at Supergiant would stay busy supporting Bastion for around the next year or so into 2012, working on new ports of the game, some concepting and prototyping for Transistor had begun as well, and in late 2012, full production on the game would begin in earnest. All 7 members, yes, you heard that right, 7, of the original team that had created Bastion was set to return to work on Transistor, with an additional few members added as well, bringing the total number of people working on the game to 12. Yep, a mere 12 people created this. Now, I wasn't as aware of or into gaming news and development histories and all that back then, so learning that such a small amount of people created Bastion and Transistor honestly surprises me. I knew Supergiant was and still is a relatively small studio, but I'm seriously even more impressed in those games knowing this now, and I think it really speaks to the talent of the few individuals that are over at Supergiant. According to development history, it was decided rather early in the project that, unlike Bastion, Transistor would be set in a sci-fi/cyberpunk setting, and while it would share the action-focused gameplay of Bastion, as well as a similar camera setup, the team decided to also mix in some strategy alongside the action, but we'll go more into detail on that later. In March of 2013, the reveal trailer for Transistor was released onto YouTube, and later on that same month, at PAX East, a playable demo was shown at the event. I can only presume the team hunkered down for the remainder of 2013 from here on though, as I can't find too much else news or details-wise regarding the game for that year. From here, however, we return to 2014, where in April the game's release date was confirmed for May 20th on a PlayStation blog, which I'm both thankful for and kinda surprised is still up today. Interestingly, the game would be launching on both PC and PlayStation 4 on the same day, which was quite different from Bastion's release, which came out first on Xbox Live Arcade and then about a month later on PC. I'm curious as if there were any specific reasons the game skipped out on Xbox for launch this time around, and in general, I guess, but I couldn't find anything concrete regarding it. Fun fact, while Transistor was Supergiant's second game they developed, it was actually the first title that they ever published, as according to their website, they worked with Warner Bros. For the initial distribution on Bastion. However, Supergiant themselves would go on to become that game's publisher too, with subsequent releases of it on other platforms. Jumping ahead just a bit again to May of 2014, where on the 16th, the launch trailer for the game was published on YouTube, and less than a week later, the game finally released on both PlayStation 4 and PC via Steam. And there it is. A somewhat brief, somewhat simple history of Transistor from its early days in late 2011 up to its release on May 20th, 2014, 10 years ago today. As I said earlier, I wasn't as aware of or into keeping up with gaming news back then as I am nowadays, but I for sure remember knowing about Transistor. In early 2013, after getting by playing simpler PC games on a laptop my family had, I was finally able to get my own desktop gaming PC. Coincidentally, this would have been around the same time the reveal trailer for Transistor was published, which is probably one of the many reasons the game is special to me, and sticks with me all these years later, as it was sort of there from the start of my proper PC gaming experience. While it may not have been out and ready to play at the same time I had my shiny new PC, it was a game I knew I would be able to fully enjoy on it. And it's a good thing it would release on PC, of course, as I wouldn't own a PlayStation 4 until quite some years later. Now, I thought for sure I had picked up the game as soon as it had released, but perhaps I gave my memory and excitement for the game back then a bit too much credit, as according to my Steam purchase details, I didn't actually purchase it until June 26th. Yeah, I know, fake fan. I think I may have just been low on funds at the time and was waiting to get a Steam wallet card or something, as I can recall constantly checking the store page for the game, eagerly awaiting the time I could finally buy it. I may have actually been waiting for it to drop a bit in price, as I apparently only paid $17.99 for it, while it normally is priced at $19.99. But at last, I finally had Transistor, and while I can't remember a lot of specific things about my first playthrough, one memory that sticks out even today is with regards to the game's intro. See, the game opens with a somewhat static scene and does not actually progress further until the player hits a button to continue. However, no prompt appears for this, and I remember just sitting there, staring at the scene before me, and dazzled by the beautiful artwork and ambiance, but also somewhat confused a minute or so later, wondering why nothing was really happening. That's where my specific, lingering memories of the launch period end, but thankfully, Steam can help conjure up a few others. As we can see, I decided to take and post a few screenshots of the game on my profile. In addition, I also wrote and posted a review for the game on Steam, which I only ever do for games I really enjoy. I want to share my thoughts on, hopefully convincing someone out there to try the game. Or for the memes. As for the game itself though, allow me to give a brief rundown. In Transistor, you take on the role of Red. No, not that one. Yeah, that one. A singer in the city of Cloudbank, where the game takes place. The game starts in what is probably Red's worst night of her life, as her significant other has been killed, impaled by a large sword that not only ended his life, but also somehow absorbed his consciousness, as well as Red's voice itself, preventing her from singing, speaking, and so on. It's quickly shown that despite being killed by the large sword, which, yes, is the Transistor, the man can speak to Red through it. And from here, Red takes up the sword, and the two go out together to explore the city. It may be silly to say I want to avoid spoilers from here on for a game that is 10 years old, but honestly, I don't really want to give any more story details than that, as I really think it's worth experiencing on your own, even all these years later. From here on, I'll just move on to how the game plays. Like Bastion, and Pyre, and Hades, actually. Man, Supergiant really likes isometric points of view, huh? Yes. Like Bastion before it, Transistor uses a top-down isometric camera to frame the action. In the game, you'll traverse different areas of the city of Cloudbank, exploring them to reveal what's happened to the city and its inhabitants, as well as gather info to find out more about who, or what, caused all the chaos happening. While exploring, you may also run into enemies known as the Process, which is where the game's combat comes into play. Combat occurs rather naturally while exploring, as you'll be able to see the Process roaming around an area, and it will only trigger once Red has walked far enough into said area. Once a battle has begun, Red is able to continue freely roaming around the area and perform attacks using different functions of the Transistor. Functions are powers and abilities Red gains throughout the game that can be equipped and swapped out by the player to best suit their desired playstyle. Depending on how a function is set by the player, the results in battle will vary greatly, as functions can not only be used as active abilities, but also set as upgrades to other functions, altering how those work, usually providing a passive bonus or change to the active attack or action. That's already quite a lot right there. But in addition to all of that, wielding the Transistor also gives Red access to a power called Turn. And this is where the aforementioned mix of strategy the devs wanted to implement comes into play. Upon activating Turn, time will pause, giving Red the chance to more effectively plan out her attacks against the Process in the area. Within Turn, Red has a limited amount of movement and actions she can take, so the player must think carefully during this time, using it to either safely reposition Red against enemy attacks or set up devastating combos against them. Upon setting a plan in turn and executing it, time will unpause and the plan will carry out in real time, forcing Red to commit to the actions the player set and causing Turn to go on a short cooldown before it can be used again. That was a lot, I know. And it honestly can get so much deeper than what those descriptions implied, if I'm being honest. All combined, however, the systems and mechanics of combat come together in Transistor to deliver a smart, snappy, and satisfying mix of action and strategy that I believe would please any fan of both real-time action combat, as well as fans of slower, more methodical, strategic turn-based combat. Before we move on, there's one last aspect of the game I want to touch on, being the audio and visuals. Now, you've probably already picked up on the fact that Transistor is absolutely gorgeous to behold based on the various footage you've seen thus far. Be it in the cutscenes of the game or the real-time gameplay itself, Transistor oozes passion, confidence, and killer style, with a mix of colorful, cyberpunk-inspired aesthetics, as well as the more mysterious, abstract, and monotone design the process adds onto the environments. As for audio, you've already been hearing some of the great tunes the game has on offer in the background throughout this video. Composer Darren Korb returns from his work on Bastion for Transistor soundtrack, joined by vocalist Ashley Barrett for some tracks that feature, well, vocals. Being in the background doesn't quite do these tracks justice, however, so have a brief sample of some of the great work on offer here. While music is of course subjective and down to the taste of the individual, I quite enjoy Transistor's soundtrack, and I think it fits the aesthetics and tone of the world in-game perfectly. With all that being said, I think we can safely end this brief overview of Transistor and my history with the game upon its release. Upon its launch in May of 2014, Transistor, like Bastion before it, was met with critical acclaim and widespread positivity. Looking over review aggregates, I was unable to spot anything lower than an 8 on reviews that use a 10-point system, and the game currently sits on Metacritic with a score of 83, while on Steam, the game is regarded as very positive, with almost 27k reviews. After the initial launch of the game on PlayStation 4 and PC on May 20th, 2014, the game would go on to appear on numerous other platforms as well, debuting on Mac and Linux operating systems on October 30th, 2014, iOS devices on June 11th, 2015, and finally, the Nintendo Switch on November 1st, 2018. Speaking on that Nintendo Switch version, Supergiant later partnered up with Limited Run Games in 2019 to produce a physical release of the game, which also included a limited collector's edition as well, and I was able to procure one myself. It's an extremely beautiful and well done collector's edition, including not only a physical copy of the game, but a replica of Red's ring, as well as pins, coasters, poster, and postcard, all themed around the world of Transistor. I actually still use those coasters to this day. Oh, and we can't forget about the soundtrack either, which I have both from the collector's edition as well as on vinyl too. Later on in January of 2015, a blog post on the Supergiant website confirmed that the game had sold over 600,000 copies between the PlayStation 4 and Steam versions of the game, with another blog post at the end of 2015 confirming it had reached the 1 million plus copies sold mark. And, like Bastion before it, Transistor wound up earning dozens upon dozens of accolades across the industry. Needless to say, Supergiant was 2 for 2 so far with regards to their game releases. Transistor was yet another astounding success. It's now 2024. Since the release of Transistor in 2014, Supergiant has continued on with their development and release of amazing games, putting out Pyre in 2017, followed by their biggest success and most popular release to date, Hades, in 2020. And of course, just 2 weeks ago today, they launched the early access period for their first ever sequel, Hades 2, which has been nothing short of amazing so far, though I've already gushed about that elsewhere. Great to see Supergiant still going strong all these years later, and I hope that the wider audience that they found with Hades has gone back to try their older titles as well, as I think each of their games hold up and offer unique gameplay, stories, music, and more worth experiencing. I'd love to see them tackle the sci-fi genre again, but I suppose only time will tell where they go next. For now, they have their hands full with Hades 2, and I wish them nothing but the best for the remainder of its development. I hope they find just as much success with it, if not even more, as they did with the original Hades. With all that being said, I think that'll wrap up this special video retrospective on Transistor. This was my most involved and personal project yet, and I really hope I was able to do justice to the topics discussed here. If I was able to convince you to play, or at least interest you in Transistor though, well, that's enough for me. As always, I appreciate you making it to the end of the video, and I truly hope you enjoyed it. Your continued viewership and support means the world to me. Thank you again, and as always, see you next time.